Hey everyone, I'm John Palumbo. I want to thank you for tuning into part two. I hope you enjoyed part one, which was Mission from God. And I left off of part one when I was about 14 years old. I started hanging out in the schoolyard with my friends. We started drinking Bacardi 151 proof with Coca-Cola in the schoolyard. And basically, I started entering into my teenage years. I titled today part two's video to dishonor your father. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about my father in today's video in part two. So not long before I started hanging out in the schoolyard when I was 14, when I had my first drink. When I was 12, I remember a night when my mother and my father were actually on the phone, and I heard my mother, they were arguing on the phone. And she was sitting in the kitchen, and I snuck into her room and I picked up the extension of the line. You know, back then we had landlines. So I picked up the extension so I could listen into the conversation. And she was telling my father, you got to send me more money. He's getting bigger. He's getting older. He's growing. Money for clothes. He wants to do this. He's getting involved in things as far as, going outside, going with my friends, wanting to go places, do things, or whatever the case may be. As a kid grows into a teenager, the money grows, as far as things that they need and whatnot. And my father was basically giving pushback, saying, I give you all that I can give you as it is. He doesn't even want to see me, and this, and she's going back at him. Well, that's not my fault. I can't control that. And finally, my father got so disgusted that I heard him say, "You know what?" To my mom, he said, "F you and F the kid." And then he hung up the phone. He slammed the phone down. He hung up on us. And I remember I slowly hung the phone up at that point, and I said to myself, "What did I do to this guy that he hates me so much?" All those feelings of rejection that I had when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, 9 years old, they just started to resurface. And the anger that I had towards him, it literally brought tears to my eyes. And I thought to myself, this guy, I want nothing ever to do to him. And in my mind and in my heart, my father died that day. I never wanted to call him. I never wanted to see him. I never wanted to talk to him again. I think in I think about a couple of years later at an aunt's house, when at his sister's house, I was at a party and he was there. He was remarried, and I seen him that one time. I made some casual small talk, but in my mind, the guy didn't exist. I never really spoke to him again for close to 10 years, which we'll talk about as we go along. But, up until that moment, there was a small part of me that always desired to have a normal relationship with my father. But when I heard my father curse me for no reason like that, you know, I was, not that I was so sensitive, I was looking for a reason to write him off. I wanted him to give me a purpose and a reason to say, I never want to hear from you or talk to you again. And without knowing it, he gave me that reason when he said, F the kid. And I just took advantage of that situation. My mother was dating this guy, John, at the time that my Uncle Tony had introduced her to. They used to work together in New York City sanitation. And she was dating him, and he became like a father figure to me. He had an ex-wife. He had about 5 kids of his own. Yet he still took an interest in me, my schoolwork. If I was cutting out of school when I was in junior high school, he would go through my notebook, make sure I did my homework. He was checking, to make sure, because he caught me cutting out of school a few times. And so he took an interest, a personal interest in my life, as a father would. And he didn't have to do that because I really wasn't his kid. So I began to look at him as my father figure. And I says, I don't need my real father. I got John in my life now. So as with everything else in my life, though, this too would become temporary. Because when I was 18 years old, no sooner do I think it, no sooner do I say it, but right after I graduated high school by chance, my mother and John, they were together 10 years, but things started to, go a different way. And they ended up breaking up. And I felt like I lost all over again. John was now out of my life again, and it just found a foundation in my mind that everything in my life was temporary. Nothing would last forever. I looked at relationships and marriage as a fantasy. I put it in my mind I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have a serious relationship with no one because just from father figures alone, I've had my heart broken. I wasn't going to allow any girl or anyone out there to break my heart or to get close to me. And I put these walls up, and these walls that I put up to be a fortress to defend myself without realizing it became a prison wall that I was shutting myself in on. And although on the outside you wouldn't notice it, on the inside I was miserable, and I began to drink more and more and drown my sorrows in Bacardi Proof 151, Proof Rum, Coca Cola. That became my daily escape. Um, a few years later, I started being in high school. My mother met this guy Mike, and she would end up eventually marrying Mike. He was a longshoreman at the time. He got me a job on the Jersey piers, and I started working on the longshoreman. I was shaping up on the piers for a short time, and Mike was a nice guy, and he ended up marrying my mother, and he really did the right thing by her. I got to say that. But unfortunately, because of my walls, I never allowed myself to really get close to Mike, to really get to know him. And he always thought that I didn't like him, but that wasn't the case. I had a chip on my shoulder, and I had this defense mechanism going up because they said, "Hey, let's see how long this guy lasts," And it wasn't a resentment that I had towards him. I had a resentment towards life. So, like I said, Mike thought I didn't like him, but that was not the case at all. I actually did like him. But what I didn't realize, like I said, is these walls were becoming more of a prison to me. They were creating a chip on my shoulder, and I was becoming very standoffish. And meanwhile, when it came to going out with my friends, we were going out to Seaside Heights every Labor. We were like 18, 19, 20 years old now. We were going to Seaside Heights, New Jersey every um, Memorial Day and Labor Day weekend. We would take limousine rides down to Atlantic City, stay at the Taj Mahal. We would go on spring break to Acapulco. So I was basically living the best time of my life. When it came to girls, I was dating girls here and there, but I wouldn't allow myself to get serious with anyone. A lot of girls that I would meet in bars, bar flies, and I did meet a girl at this particular time um, that we hooked up at a bar one night, and I would end up with a 7 year on and off roller coaster ride with her. I'll talk a little bit more about her as we go along also. But again, nothing serious. It was just basically a lustful relationship, no strings attached. I liked it that way. She's been burnt in her life. She liked it that way. We figured this way we could just have all the fun and nobody gets hurt. Meanwhile, as this was going on, my mother had another sister. Her younger sister was my Aunt Carol and my Uncle Dominic. They became born again Christians during the 1970s, during the Jesus movement. And my aunt would often tell me about God and tell me about the Bible. And I remember in May of 1988, she invited me to her church in Brooklyn. It was called New Jerusalem Christian Church. And it was a day they were having called Friendship Day. And everybody was encouraged to bring a friend to church, so she invited me. So I didn't want to tell her no, so I went, and the church was in Gravesend, in the Gravesend section of Brooklyn. And I went. They gave me my first Bible, and as I sat listening to the sermon, I couldn't help but realize that this church was very different than the Catholic Church. They were singing, they were praying, people were talking in tongues. This was a very new experience for me. And as I sat there, a strange thing happened. I'm watching the preacher preach the message. And as he's preaching, a thought like a lightning flashed through my mind. Would you want to do that one day? And I'm like, why would I think that? And I'm looking at this guy preaching. And my answer was a quick, absolutely not. Now, I'm in church, so I'm thinking God's talking to me. I'm saying, God, no, I like it. I'm comfortable right here, sitting right here. I don't want to be up on that pulpit. Um, Little did I realize that God was using my aunt to plant seeds to lead me down a road that he had a plan and a purpose for me. When I went home that day, I put the Bible out they gave me on the shelf, and I continued with life as usual. I continued my party lifestyle. As I said, as we go away for spring break, the Jersey Shore. Life just continued. And I went from working on the piers to becoming a plumber's helper, an apprentice. And I remember, my partner every day. We used to always drink. Me and my partner. We used to have payday. We used to go out to bars after work. Drinking basically became my escape. It's what I did best. I just was always looking to drink, and I didn't realize it, but I had become a functional alcoholic at the time. And of course, it led to other things. Not only was I into gambling, but the drinking also led to substance abuse as time went on. I was smoking cigarettes at this time. And basically, all my vices were starting to fall into place. And it wasn't until one day in 1989 where everything literally came to a crashing halt, which I'm going to speak about in part three. Thanks for tuning in.